So again, we've been kind of going through the book of Judges. Like I said before, we haven't been able to do a real in-depth study of the book. But the first week we looked at the first two chapters there and seen where God had told them to drive out the inhabitants that are there and get rid of them, get rid of all their stuff. And the children of Israel didn't heed to what He said. They didn't get rid of the. And we're going to be in Judges chapter 13. We're going to start there. They didn't heed to what He said, so he brought them under the power of other people who would come in and oppress them. And then last week we looked at Gideon, one of the judges there in Israel, and we looked at his life and things about him. And tonight we're going to look at Samson. And first, if I say Samson and it sounds like it's got a P in it, it's probably the same as when I say Clemson. It has a P in it, and I've always said Samson, and it had a P in it, but it does not. It's Samson. So it may sound like I'm putting a P in it, but I'm not. But we looked at Gideon last week and how when God first called Gideon, Gideon was hiding. Gideon was hiding at the winepress, if you remember. Gideon was more along the line of a coward. He was scared for his life. And tonight, like I said, we're going to look at Samson, and we're going to go from the coward to the conqueror, because as a conqueror, Samson was mighty. But Samson had his faults as well. So we're going to look at Samson, and like I said, we got a long way to go. We got several chapters that I want to cover, and we're going to hit the high points in Samson's life, and we'll kind of skip over some things, but I'll kind of tell you what's going on in his life here. But in chapter 13, we'll start reading in verse 13, and it says, "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines 40 years. So, again, we see that Israel does evil in the sight of the Lord. Again and again and again. That's what the book of Judges is showing, is how they would do evil in the sight of the Lord, and then they would repent, God would raise up a judge, and then He would deliver them from their oppressor. It happens time and time again, and now we're at Samson, who is the 12th judge of Israel, and now he's come in. We're getting to Samson. We haven't got to his birth yet. But we're getting to Samson, where the Philistines are now oppressing Israel because, again, they did evil in the sight of the Lord. So we see in verse 2 where it says, "And there was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren, and bare not. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman, and said unto her, Behold, now thou art barren, and bearest not, but thou shalt conceive, and bear a son. Now therefore beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing. For lo, thou shalt conceive, and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." So we see Samson's mama here. And if you want to know more about the vow of the Nazarite, it's in Numbers chapter 6 is where you find that. But we see Samson's mom, and she's not able to have children. She's barren. And the angel of the Lord comes to her and says, "You're going to bear a child. You're going to bear a child, but beware. Don't eat any grapes. Don't drink any wine. Don't drink strong drink. Don't let a razor come upon his head, because from your womb to his death," which in verse 7 it says, until the day of his death, he's going to be a Nazarite. He's going to be a Nazarite. He's going to have that vow upon his life from his womb to his death. And so beware, these things are going to happen. And then we see in verse 6, it says, it says, "For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head. And for the child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines." So Samson is being separated, and the angel of the Lord tells her this is the reason why. He's going to be the one that's going to deliver Israel out of the hands of the Philistines. And then it goes on in chapter 6, or verse 6, it says, "Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, a man of God came unto me, and his countenance was like the countenance of an angel of God, very terrible. But I asked him not whence he was, neither told me his name. But he said unto me, Behold, thou shalt conceive and bear a son. And now drink no wine nor strong drink, neither eat any unclean thing, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. Then Manoah entreated the Lord and said, O my Lord, let the man of God which thou didst send come again unto us, and teach us what we shall do unto the child that shall be born. So the angel of the Lord comes to Samson's mama and tells her what's going to happen. And then she goes back and tells Manoah, his dad, and he's like, I don't know. Let me pray. So he prays, and then it goes on. And like I said, we're going to have to skip some stuff. But the angel of the Lord comes to Manoah and repeats the same stuff. And then Manoah's like, tells him, we need to have a sacrifice here. And you see it's in verse 19 here. So Manoah took a kid with a meat offering and offered it upon a rock unto the Lord. And the angel did wondrously. And Manoah and his wife looked on. For it came to pass when the flame went up toward heaven from off the altar that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar, and Manoah and his wife looked on and fell on their faces to the ground. So when they burnt this offering and the flame was going up to heaven, the angel of the Lord ascended with it. And they fell on their face and they worshiped. And then it says, But the angel of the Lord did no more appear to Manoah and to his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was an angel of the Lord. And Manoah said unto his wife, We shall surely die, because we have seen God. But his wife said unto him, If the Lord were pleased to kill us, he would not have received a burnt offering and a meat offering at our hands, neither would he have showed us all these things, nor would as at this time have told us such things as these. So Manoah was worried. He said, We've seen God, we're going to die now. But his wife kind of, well, I don't think this is the way it's going to happen. I don't think we're going to die because he accepted our offering to him. So kind of says at this time have told us such things as these. So why would he have told us these things if he was just going to kill us? So she kind of had a little bit more common sense at this time. And then verse 24 we see, And the woman bare a son and called his name Samson. And the child grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. So we see Samson's born here. So she's barren, she couldn't have any kids. The angel of the Lord comes and says, You're going to have a child, but beware, because he's going to be a Nazarite. So you have to follow, even from your womb, he's going to be a Nazarite. So you have to follow this just as well as he's going to have to follow it. So even as he grew as a child, the Lord started blessing Samson. And then as he was getting older and older, the Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times. So even as a young man, when I was thinking about this morning, how the ladies will do when y'all sit around and y'all talk, and it's my child is doing this. Oh, little Stevie started walking at 8 months old. Oh, little Susie started talking when she was about a year and a month. And she said Dada already. And Samson's mom could probably sit back and be like, Let me tell you, this is what happened with me. I couldn't have kids. The angel of the Lord came to me and told me, You're going to have a child. So I could kind of see where the Spirit of the Lord began to fall on him at times when he was a young man. And we're going to go to chapter 14. And it says, And Samson went down to Timnath. Now, Timnath is an ancient Canaanite city, but it was given to Judah at first, and then it was given to Dan. But it was under the control of the Philistines most of the time. But Samson probably had no business going here, but we'll see more about Samson's life and him going places where he had no business going. And Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. So Samson goes down to Timnath, where he probably should not have been. He goes down there and he sees a daughter of the Philistines, and he says, Mom and Daddy, that's the one I want. Get her for me. That's going to be my wife. And it says in verse 3, Then his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. So his mother and his father try to talk sense into him. Look, God told us not to mingle with these people. We were supposed to drive them out. We're supposed to get rid of them. We're not supposed to have anything of theirs. We're not supposed to have their pictures. We're not supposed to have any of their altars, their false gods. If we don't drive them out, their gods are going to be a snare to us. So maybe you shouldn't marry one of them. Maybe you should marry one of your brethren here, or not your brethren, your sisters here, or someone from the tribe of Dan, or from another tribe. And he said, Nope, 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 I want this one. She pleases me well. And then it says, But his father and his mother knew not that it was the Lord, that he sought an occasion against the Philistines, for at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So again, the Philistines had the dominion over Israel. And then it goes on, and it says in verse 5, Then went Samson down, and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid. And he had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father and his mother what he had done. So a young lion comes out as he's traveling down to Timnath. A young lion comes out on the Samson, and he tears it in two. Now, it may be that the Bible says it was a young lion, but again, has anybody ever had a house cat climb your leg? It hurts. It's hard to fight a cat. They got them crazy sharp claws. When we were over at Rick's house, they had them kittens out there, and Zipporah fell in love with the kittens. But those kittens have claws, and those kittens will get a hold of you even at this big. But a lion came out, and Samson, as a conqueror, rent this lion as he would have a kid. And that's a goat. Just so everybody, we're on the same page. I'm sure y'all know, but it's not a kid, it's a goat. But he rent this lion, and that just shows the strength of Samson. What mighty man this is. And then it goes on and says in verse 7, And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. Again, he goes to this woman that he really had no business being with, and it says they talked, and she pleased him well. She made Samson happy. And it says, And after a time he returned to take her, and turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion, and he took thereof in his hands, and went on eating, and came to his father and his mother, and he gave them, and they did eat. But he told them not that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast. For so used to do the young men, or so used the young men to do. And it came to pass when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. So as he's traveling back, he sees the carcass of the lion there, and now it has a honeycomb in it. Now, as a Nazarite, he's not to, what the Bible says is, come upon a dead thing or a dead body. He's not supposed to get near them. But Samson just goes up to it and goes ahead and snatches out that honeycomb and starts eating. So Samson's got a bunch of problems. That one, in verse 1 of this chapter, he says he saw a woman. He's got a problem with his sight. He's got a problem when he sees something that he wants. And then he had a problem where he's breaking a Nazarite vow by going to a dead carcass. So Samson just goes along, and it says in Samson in verse 12, And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If you can certainly declare it me within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. So we kind of see here, a little difference between Gideon and Samson. Gideon never stepped up and had this kind of confidence that Samson had. Samson's here with the Philistines, and he says, "Let me tell y'all a riddle." So he's kind of brash. He's kind of brazen when it comes to things. He says, "Let me tell you this riddle." But he knows his strength. He knows what he can do. He knows that the Spirit of the Lord can fall upon him, and he can do mighty things. So Samson's real brash when it comes to that. And he says, let me tell you a riddle. And he says, I'll give you 30 sheets or 30 change of garments. He says, but if you cannot declare it me, then shall ye give me 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. And they said unto him, put forth thy riddle, that we may hear it. So he says, let me tell you a riddle. And they say, tell us, we'll make this deal with you. Then it goes on, it says, and he said unto them, out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. So if they would have just broke out their King James Bible and read this story, they would have already known the answer to the riddle. But here we are. So they couldn't expound on it within 3 days. And it says, and it came to pass on the seventh day that they said unto Samson's wife, entice thy husband. Now this is going to become a repeat pattern for Samson in his life. They come to his wife and said, entice thy husband that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. Have ye called us to take that we have? Is it not so? And Samson's wife wept before him and said, thou dost hate me, and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it me. And he said unto her, behold, I have not told it my father, nor my mother, and shall I tell thee? So his wife comes to him crying and weeping and says, Samson, tell me what this riddle means. Please tell me. And he says, I haven't even told my father or my mother. Why am I going to tell you? And it says in 17, it says, and she wept before him the 7 days, while their feast lasted, and it came to pass on the 7th day that he told her, because she lay sore upon him, and she told the riddle to the children of her people. So for 7 days, how can I say this without getting myself in trouble? For 7 days, he had a nagging, crying wife. Fellas, for 7 days, for 7 days, she cried to him. She wept to him. Samson, tell me this riddle. Tell me this riddle. Tell me. And like I said, this is a repeat pattern that we'll get to in Samson's life. Tell me this riddle. And finally, Samson told her. Samson, again, doing what Samson does, tells her, and she goes and tells her people. And let me hold up real quick. In a marriage, it shouldn't be, I didn't tell my mother and my father, why would I tell you? It should be, I tell that lady everything before I tell my mama and daddy. There should be that closeness there. And just like she ran to her people and told her people were no longer her people were Samson. That was a mouthful. But her people was now Samson. And it says in verse 18, I'm about to get to one of my favorite phrases in the Bible. It says in 18, and the men of the city said unto him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said unto them, if ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. One of my favorite phrases in the Bible. If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have figured out the riddle. If you wouldn't have bugged my wife, you wouldn't have figured out the riddle. We must be careful. We must guard. Just like Satan came to Eve because ladies are the weaker vessel. We have to guard our wives from things that may come along, just like these fellas come to Samson's wife. He says, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, I couldn't say that enough. Plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out the riddle. If it wouldn't been for my wife and y'all going to my wife, you wouldn't have figured this out. And it goes on in verse 19, it says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and slew 30 men of them and took their spoil. And being a man of his word, and it says, and he gave change of garments unto them which expounded the riddle, and his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. So Samson had a temper, and his anger was hot. And he went out and he killed 30 men. He went out and killed, it says he went and he slew 30 men of them and took their spoil. But he gave them what he made the deal for. He gave them the garments that he said, if you figure out the riddle, I'll give you these garments. He still stuck by his word and gave them the garments, but he killed 30 men. And his anger was kindled, so that temper that he had, it was now kindled, so he went to his father's house. It says in verse 29, but Samson's wife was given to his companion who he had used as his friend. We're kind of going to skip over chapter 15. A lot of people, we know a lot what happens there, and I'll kind of expound on it, and it's all there. But his wife was given to a companion, and when Samson finds out about it, he's very mad. And that temper that he has, he goes out and catches 300 foxes. He catches 300 foxes, and he ties a firebrand in between the tails of 2 of them, sets it on fire, sends it out through the Philistines' crops, and it sets their crops on fire. Now they're mad about this. So then Samson takes and they go and then they kill his wife and his father-in-law, and then from there he goes and kills some more of them. Then he sits on a rock, and then the men of Judah come and they pretty much arrest Samson and deliver him to the Philistines. They take him to the Philistines, and this is the famous story where he takes the jawbone of a donkey, a new jawbone of a donkey, and the new actually means moist or fresh, and it's gross, it's dripping. But he takes that jawbone and he slays 1,000 men of the Philistines. And he after doing that, he says, "I'm thirsty." And there's a hollow spot in the jawbone, and God sends water through that hollow spot, and Samson drinks water out of this new jawbone. It's kind of gross. So that's what happens in chapter 15 there, and that's a brief, but like I said, we got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Chapter 16, it starts up, and this again. Then went Samson to Gaza, and he saw, again, Samson seeing. His eyeballs are leading him astray. And he saw there an harlot, and went unto her. And it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson is come hither. And they compassed him in, and laid wait on him all night in the gate of the city, and were quite all the night, saying, In the morning when it is day, we shall kill him. Now, I'm sure they already got the news of what Samson has done, where he slew 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. I don't know how many men I would have to take with me if I say I'm going to sit out here and wait for Samson to wake up in the morning and we're going to get him. But that's what these men were doing. And in verse 3 it says, And Samson lay till midnight, and arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gate of the city, and the 2 posts, and went away with them, bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of an hill that is before Hebron. So Samson takes the 2 posts from the gate, and the bar and all. Now, if you try looking up how much this might weigh, you get about 1,000 different answers. But it was a lot of weight. And Samson takes them, and he goes and sets them top of a hill. So Samson's kind of showing he's a little bit of a jokester. He's brash, he's brazen, and he's a jokester. These guys are waiting on him, and he's like, okay, you want to wait by this gate? I'm going to take everything from it, and I'll take it up on top of this hill. And then it says in verse 4, And it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. So not only was Samson doing what he wasn't supposed to do and going into harlots, he fell in love with a woman. I'm sure he saw her and thought she was pretty, but he fell in love with her. And it says in verse 5, And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and said unto her, Entice him, and see wherein his great strength lies, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we will give thee every one of us 1,100 pieces of silver. So this is, like I said, it's a repeat pattern in Samson's life where he chooses a woman that he probably shouldn't have chose, and then their people come to him and say, figure out what's going on with Samson. Find out where his strength comes from. Let us know. We want to afflict him. And it says, And Delilah said to Samson, Tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lies, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. And Samson said unto her, If they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak, and be as another man. And then the lords of the Philistines brought up her 7 green withs, which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber, and she said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. and he brake the withs as a thread of tow is broken when it toucheth a fire, so his strength was not known. And Delilah said unto Samson, Behold, thou hast mocked me and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, If thou bind me fast with new ropes that never were occupied, then shall I be weak and be as another man. Delilah therefore took new ropes and bound him therewith, and said unto him, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And there were liers in wait, abiding in the chamber, and he brake them from off his arms like a thread. And Delilah said unto Samson, Hitherto thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, If thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web. And she fastened it with the pin, and said unto them, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awakened out of his sleep, and went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. So 3 times Delilah comes to him and says, Samson, Samson, just like his wife did. Please tell me, please tell me. And 3 times Samson lies to her. Now he's got a lying tongue. To go along with all his other faults, now he's a liar. He lied to her 3 different times, just fooling around. He didn't learn his lesson the first time. The sin came to his door, knocked on his door, and he fooled around with it a little bit. And he didn't learn a lesson. The lords of the Philistines were there. It came again. Tell me, tell me, tell me. And again, Samson makes up a lie. The Philistines are there. 3rd time, he never learns his lesson. Tell me, tell me, tell me. He gets burned again. The Philistines are there. And then it says in verse 15, And she said unto him, How canst thou say, I love thee, when thy heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lies. And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him, so that his soul was vexed unto death. Again, he stuck with a nagging woman. For 7 days, his wife done the same thing. And now Delilah is doing the same thing until he's vexed almost to death. And it says in 17, or it says, So that his soul was vexed unto death, that he told her all his heart, and said unto her, There hath not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. So after she came to him time and time again, and he lied to her time and time again, he finally breaks down and says, This is where my strength lies. He says, No razor has ever come upon my head. So Delilah, it says, And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, Come up this at once, for he hath showed me all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and brought money in their hand. And she made him asleep upon her knees. And she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, The Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep, and said, I will go out as at other times before, and shake myself. And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. So Samson didn't realize it. Hey, I just told Delilah exactly what it was, what my strength lied. And she said, The Philistines are here again. And Samson getting up with that brazen, I'll just go out again and shake them off. It's all right. And he didn't realize at that point in time that the Lord had departed from him. We got to be careful what we mess with in life. Because if we mess with the wrong things, if we want to dabble in sin, the Lord may depart from us. He'll get fed up. So we have to be careful. It says, But the Philistines took him and put out his eyes, and brought him down to Gaza, and bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind at the prison house. And I preached on Samson, I don't remember when it was, but preached on right there on verse 22, it says, Howbeit the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. So his head was, they put a razor to his head and shaved his head. And now they've arrested him. They got him down at the prison house. But it says, howbeit the hairs of his head began to grow again. Howbeit, just like in chapter 2 when we seen that the anger of the Lord was kindled against the children of Israel, where he was hot against them, but it says, nevertheless, he raised up judges. Same here. Samson done wrong. Samson, and we'll see where Samson actually repented from it, and toward the end of this chapter. And Samson gets it right with God. But it says, howbeit the hairs of his head began to grow. And it says, then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their God, and to rejoice, for they said, our God hath delivered Samson our enemy into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God hath delivered unto our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. And it came to pass, when their hearts were merry, that they said, call for Samson, that he may make us sport. And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. One thing here real quick, we got to be careful, because just like with Samson here, it led them to make a sacrifice to their god Dagon. When people see us as Christians, and that's what we claim to be Christians, to be Christ-like, when we fall, they're going to use that occasion against us. They're going to use that, and they're not going to make sacrifices to Dagon. They may, but that will be used against us when we fall. So we have to be careful. We have to stay close to the Lord in our walk. And it says, now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women, and behold, that beheld while Samson made sport. So all these people show up to this great sacrifice to Dagon, and they're making sport of Samson. They're using him to get enjoyment out of it. And it says, and Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, of the one with his right hand, and of the other with his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might. And the house fell upon the lords, and upon all the people that were there within. They were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. So we see Samson praying. He says, Lord, give me my strength. Just one last time, let me have that, and let me be avenged for my 2 eyes that they poked out. And we see that God granted him that, and he slew in that time more than he slew in his life. And it says, then his brethren and all his house of his father came down and took him, and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, in the burying place of Manoah his father, and he judged Israel 20 years. So we see Samson, his family got to come in and get his body, and they buried him where the burying place of his father, and he got to be buried there. But that's the life of Samson. There's so many things that we can learn from Samson. What not to do, and just like I started off every other message on Wednesday, I read in 1 Corinthians in chapter 10, and I'll read it real quick. It said, moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat of that same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted. So this is an example for us. The life of Samson, we need to look at it and see where Samson failed. We can see where Samson succeeded, but we need to look at where he failed. And also, real quick, like I said, we didn't have all the time to go through the entire book of Judges, but in Judges chapter 17 and verse 6, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And then in chapter 18, verse 1, it says, In those days there was no king in Israel. And in those days the tribe of the Danites sought them an inheritance to dwell in. And then in chapter 19, verse 1, it says, And it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel. And then also in 21:25, it says, In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. There was no king in Israel. This is supposed to be an example unto us in our life. Jesus is king. He is the King of kings and the Lord of lords. If we let him rule over us and we truly follow after him, we'll do what's right in his eyes. And we won't do what's right in ours. So we must be careful and follow after Jesus and not be overtaken by sin as we've seen Samson did. Samson's downfall was sin nature. Our downfall could be sin nature. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the time that we've spent together. Father, I pray that you'll be with each and every one of us as we leave here tonight. I pray that you would put your hand upon us. I pray as those that are with us that are going to be traveling, I pray, Father, that you would be with them as they travel. Father, I pray that you'd be with Olivia as she comes in tonight. I pray you would just work in that situation there. And Father, I pray you'd continue to be with our pastor. I pray your hand would be upon him and you would just continue to heal him. And Father, I pray that he can get back with us on Sunday. Father, he is missed, and we love you and just thank you and praise you. And in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.